Welcome back. We're doing a copy today of a drawing by the great mid-20th century artist Isabel Bishop. The reason I picked this is because it's kind of a boring pose. It's probably a study for a figure in one of our compositions of a guy who's just chilling, but it's a beautiful drawing of a clothed figure, and when we start posing for each other in class, we're not always going to be creating the most dynamic poses. So this is similar to something that you might be confronting in a life drawing class. So we're going to start. I'm going to remind you, I'm working site size again, so my drawing is going to be about the same size as the images on the screen. I encourage you to do the same thing if your paper is tacked up next to your screen. And that way we can mark sort of about where the drawing needs to start and end. We can draw the head as a volume that's obviously tipped down and occupies about 1/8 of the overall height, maybe a little less than 1/8 if he's an average sized guy. I'm trying to use these lines to show an understanding right from the start that his head is tipped down. I'm going to put his eyes across the middle of the face, again, to show that that's a little low, I think, that his head is tipped downward. We'll deal more with that later. Because his head is tipped down, the points of his shoulders are about as high as his chin. You see that? So the length of the neck as a measured distance kind of disappears. And notice that the shoulder on this side is very close to the face, and the shoulder on this side is quite far from the face. And I could use a little fractional thinking, and I could tell myself that the distance between the forehead and the back of the head is about the same as the distance between the back of the head and this shoulder. You see what I just did there? So that's just a doubling. That gets us out to here. Now I'm going to sketch that trapezius up to the shoulder. And now I'm going to measure for a midpoint. So top of his skull is probably about here. The bottom of his heels is here. And we would expect the midpoint to be around the level of his wrist. Remember, because your wrist falls very close to your trochanter. And I'm going to measure that myself. You can measure it also if you use proper technique with arm fully extended. It's good to, you could put your pencil right on the screen, but it's good to practice this, because if your arm is fully extended, you can also measure things that are far away from you, like living people. So as I measure this, I see that his wrist is not exactly in the middle of his body. And I wonder if anyone in the class can explain why that is happening. Why isn't the wrist exactly centered? No, our eye level's probably around his middle of his body. It has to do with something we already talked about. Yeah, we lost the height of his neck, right? Remember when we did proportion? We had about a half or 3/8 of a head between the chin and the pit of the neck. On this guy, we just lost that distance, right? So as a result, this distance here is slightly more than this distance here. So I'm going to try to draw that, and I'm trying to make this a little above center. So probably could be just a little higher, and that looks about right. So that's going to be our, and if you're using sight size, you could have just done this the easy way and just carried your level across. You see that this line matches up with the wrist. This line is with the bottom of the heels, and this line is the top of the head. So that gives us the location of the pubic arch, and so that's going to help guide us if we use the Loomis method to draw that triangle. And we can see through the shirt pretty much where the sternum is, and we can fit the rib cage sort of inside that triangle. Again, this is a 3/4 view, so the rib cage is going to extend past the triangle on this side, but you get the idea. And there's the pelvis. And now we go right down to the ground with the 2 legs. Part of the reason this pose is not very exciting or dynamic is because his weight's evenly distributed on the 2 feet, right? So it's not what we call contrapposto. It's more of just the head is centered above the space between the feet. You see that? So each foot is bearing about the same amount of weight. So we're going to just block these legs in and make sure that if we go straight down from the sternum, we end up at this point between the 2 feet. So this foot comes forward like that, and this foot like that. That doesn't come forward quite that much, does it? Okay, we're gonna do the arms now. Notice the wrist on the near side comes down a little bit past our center line to about here. And this wrist falls exactly on the center line. And the hands are pretty big. He's got bigger than average size hands, I think, to convey the sense that he's somebody who probably works with his hands, I'm guessing. And the last thing I'm going to sort of block in here is the hat, which is going to bring us above our top line. And I'm going to indicate the position of the ear to show the gesture of the head. So this is the time in a drawing to sort of take a step back and just make sure that the gesture of the drawing is similar to the gesture of the original. I'm feeling like my feet are a little too close together. There's a little wider stance, so I'm just gonna bump this out a little. You see what that does? Sort of aligns with the gesture a little better. And I'm gonna say I'm happy with that. I complain a lot about the artists on the internet, but one thing you see in this drawing that you don't see in a lot of art on the internet is these beautiful kind of searching lines, which you can see that in my drawing too, not as beautiful, but you see she's really searching for the contours, and you can see how she has lighter pencil lines underneath, and then she's finishing the drawing in, I think, ink and ink wash, but you can tell there's a process of exploration here that is often lacking in the kind of work that we see these days online. We're going to jump right into the face. She appears to have been right-handed, as I can tell by the slope of these hatching lines here and these hatching lines here. I see hardly any lines that are sloping the way I tend to draw, which is this way, because I'm left-handed. Because this is a pretty simple little drawing, I'm going to do sort of what I'd call a close copy today, which means I'm going to try to hatch the way she hatched, and that'll align with most people watching this who are probably right-handed. So we're going to start with the hat and draw the little nub on the top of the beanie, and this little shadow here. A close copy doesn't mean it has to be perfect. It just means that we're not translating her drawing into our style. We are attempting to draw in her style. So it's a different objective. This eye placement is going to be critical, so let's take a quick measurement. We've got, wait a second. So this is the margin of the cheek on this side. Here's the center of this eye, and here's the center of this ear. So we know where this is, and we know where the ear is. So this eye is going to be about centered between the center of the ear and the center of the cheek. So let's put that in first. You see how it's positioned right about where I had placed that plane change earlier. And because he has a large nose and it's tipped down, the nose is going to be basically halfway between the brim of the hat and the bottom of the chin. So we're going to mark halfway down. And then we're just going to draw this nose. Just draw what we see here. And these are measurements that you can take from life also. Here's this little smile. It's kind of protruding bottom lip. And his chin. And the jawline, which is angling up towards the bottom of the ear. And some strong diagonal hatching, which is throwing all this into shadow. And a little hatching around this eye. Now the neck slopes from behind the ear about 20 degrees from vertical, and collar comes around behind the neck like this. There's some contour hatching showing the roundness of the collar. Isabel Bishop is probably best known for her etchings. It's actually, I have a little etching collection at home, and one of the highlights is an original Isabel Bishop print. Sorry, I just got her confused with the poet Elizabeth Bishop. And because she's a printmaker, you can see very confident hatching direction throughout the drawing. So you'll notice I just added a little bit to the back of the beanie here. Because we're using pencil and not ink, we're going to actually do a little smudging in this drawing just to replicate the effect of the ink wash. So you can see what that feels like. And if I zoom out a little, I can see that I need to sort of bulk out this shoulder on the right. I was sort of a little short right there. And I'm feeling like it would probably be useful at this point to know where his belt is. We know that the wrist is here. We found that already. We know that the bottom of the chin is here. Notice that the top of the belt, or the center of the belt, is about 1/3 of the way between the wrist and the chin. So that puts it right about here. So now I can sort of block in the vest. And again, it's really useful. When I say blocking in, I mean I'm thinking about this as a more regular shape than it is. And when I copy shapes like this, shapes that are sort of unfamiliar to me, I'm drawing them with an openness of mind that I would have if I was drawing the contours of a country or a state that I was not familiar with. It's just a geometric shape. That's all it is. Let's try the same thing with the other side. Maybe it helps you a little that I'm doing the block in on the photograph in red so you can sort of see it the way I'm trying to see it, as a simpler geometric shape than it truly is. And then there's the belt and the shirt front. And after you block something in like that, you're free to go back, and if there are curves, you can, as you darken the form, you can emphasize some of the curvature of some of these plane changes, but to get the overall shape right, you're better off thinking of it geometrically. Okay. This arm is pretty simple, and I'm just gonna draw it without blocking it in first. And over here, we've got some so when you go from, let's say you've done a lot of life drawing, you sort of know how to draw nude figures, and then you go to draw a clothed figure. A lot of people then come to me and say, well, you never taught us how to draw clothes. One way to learn how to draw clothes is by doing drapery studies, where you practice drawing just arrangements of cloth. That can be really useful. But you can see a beautiful little study like this. There aren't any fully rendered folds in the cloth at all. So she's treating the clothing more like foliage or something. Like it's a sort of she's using a shorthand to give a sense of the clothes without actually rendering out any of the details. And those are useful skills. And the reason I don't teach people how to do that is because, as with drawing foliage, there are as many different ways of doing it as there are artists. And the best way to learn how to get these effects is just to copy artists that you like, and things like hair, clothing, leaves on trees, grass, things that are just really boring to render photorealistically, drawing every hair, every blade of grass, but are often features of the kinds of things that artists like to draw. You need to learn a shorthand. And a drawing like this is giving us a lot of good ideas about how to handle it. Okay, I'm just gonna do a little more with these hands. These hands are also beautifully kind of simplified, like you can read the gesture of this thumb, but it's all conveyed with just a few lines, which she would have had to learn to do while in her life as a printmaker. She would do prints with many figures in them. Some of the figures are going to be very small scale, and you have to learn how to render things very, very simply. I think I'm just going to barrel through this drawing with no breaks, so just try to keep up with me. You'll have some time at the end if you need it, but so notice, just like his shirt was a little fuller on the right than I initially blocked it in, the pant leg actually comes out as far as the outside of this hand. So there's a little more. I was sort of blocking things in, thinking about the limbs and not the clothes. So let's scroll down a little. And we're going to keep using that smudging technique to show to replicate the effect of the ink washes. Most of us these days spend about as much time looking at photographs as we spend looking at reality. If you count every minute watching TV, every minute on your computer or your phone looking at photographs of things that you want to look at, to the point where I think we confuse photographic reality with lived reality, and they are really different things. A drawing like this is this artist's lived reality in front of a living person, and it's in a masterpiece like this that the qualities of that lived reality are very well conveyed. That's what makes it exciting to look at. And it feels like the kind of drawing that's probably not done from a photograph. And one of the hazards of working from photographs, I believe, is that especially in our age, when, as I said, we confuse lived reality with photographic reality, having the photograph in front of you is going to compel you to copy everything about it, and to make your drawing look as much like the photograph as possible. In other words, your drawing will not look like a drawing anymore, it will look like a photograph. And that's one of the sad ways that people today will often express their admiration for a drawing in a way that I find kind of sad and funny, but you'll show somebody a drawing and they'll say, "That's so good, it looks just like a picture." Well, of course it's a picture, it's a drawing. What they mean is that it looks just like a photograph, because that's the only standard they know for image making. It's the gold standard, when in fact, it shouldn't look like a photograph, it should look like a drawing. If you take a photograph and it's any good, it doesn't really need to be turned into a drawing. Hang it on the wall. It's a beautiful thing if it's a good photograph. That's not what drawing's about. And part of what makes this look like a drawing from life is the speed of it, which we're trying to emulate today. But it's like you can almost feel how this guy is like kind of tired of standing there and wants to go do something else. And that's part of why I feel strongly that this is a study from life. And frankly, the artist wants to be done with it too. She wants to convey something here and then move on to the next challenge. So notice I'm hatching backwards. I'm hatching right-handed for the most part, although I screwed up right here, went back to my left-handed shading, sorry. And I'm also trying to emulate, like, see how the twistiness of these contour lines actually helps show the wrinkliness of his clothes. I'm sort of straightening things out a little too much. And that sort of goes to the point of the value of this, as opposed to last time we drew shirtless Zac Efron from a photograph. We learned something about anatomy, but we didn't learn anything at all about line quality. The way we learn about line quality is by looking at drawings. And we're also learning a little bit about proportion and anatomy here, but we are mainly learning, well, we're additionally learning about a great artist's approach to these things. So that's going to do it for the video today. Remember to smash that subscribe button, right? Is that what you say? Yeah, let's go. Let's hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, you guys. Come on. Tell your friends. Not that I make any money from YouTube, but yeah, maybe someday. My production values are pretty lame, to be honest. But it is what it is. Thanks for watching. See you later.